You watch a video for a tasty recipe with those famous chocolate biscuits with a cream filling. Later, you finish your dinner, but you're still hungry, so you open the cupboard and choose, that's right, those very same biscuits. There's a clear reason for this. It's called the priming effect, a mental process through which exposure to one stimulus influences our response to something else. It only takes a small trigger, a word, a concept, a sensory stimulus, to subtly influence our behavior at an unconscious level. Let's do a quick experiment. Read this. Now complete this word. That's right, drunk. However, had the first word been Zappa, you will probably have answered Frank. The first word has influenced the way you thought about the second. You have just been primed. But don't worry, it isn't permanent. The priming effect takes many forms. Because of how the brain works by association, it can reach ideas that are far away from the original concept. But what's actually going on in the brain? Just like throwing rocks into a pond makes ripples in the water, a stimulus which activates a particular cluster of neurons leads to the activation of related clusters, and so on, producing a chain reaction of neural activity. For example, thinking about the word sea might lead you to start thinking about holidays, swimming, hot summer days, and so on. In a famous experiment, two groups of students from New York University were asked to put together sentences starting with a random word. One of the two groups were presented with words associated with the elderly, such as Florida, a popular region for the US retirees, and other words such as grey, forgetful, or wrinkle. Students were then asked to walk to another room to start the next stage of the experiment. What the students didn't know was that this was the actual test. Researchers measured the speed the students walked from one room to the other, and found that those who had been primed with words associated with old age walked significantly more slowly. This phenomenon is called the ideomotor response, and it actually gives us two examples of the priming effect. The first is conceptual. The idea of old age was generated by association with related concepts, such as Florida or grey. The second is behavioral, that thinking about old age led students to adopt an associated behavior of moving slowly, just like the elderly. Researchers conducted the opposite experiment as well. During an initial task, students were asked to walk very slowly. During the next stage of the experiment, where they were tasked with identifying words, researchers found that terms associated with old age were identified much more quickly than by those students who were not primed. But what happens when, instead of old age, the suggested topic is money? According to a 2006 study published in Nature, simply the presence of money leads us to become more selfish. The effect could even be achieved using monopoly money, which led students to be less likely to help a researcher pick up a pencil that accidentally fell from their clipboard. Take all this with a grain of salt though. Interpretation on how to apply the priming effect to social contexts are somewhat controversial, and some attempts at repeating those studies found no effect whatsoever. Being aware of the priming effect can help us weaken the negative impact of this cognitive bias. Case in point, ads. A well-known example is the James Bond film Spectre, which featured the beer Heineken being drunk by various characters, including, of course, James Bond himself, in an attempt to increase the product sales. However, if we are aware of the effect that different stimuli can have on our behavior, we can try and fight their influence on our decision-making process. We can avoid buying that beer, for example. If we are aware of this effect, we can also use it to influence other people's behavior for the better. For example, when writing a work email, we can use positive words, such as efficient, available, and teamwork, rather than negative terms, stress, duty, or problem, to increase our co-workers' productivity. We are complex animals, and our behavior is influenced by lots of factors. But simply being aware of this can help us to make better decisions. So, when doing something, for example, clicking on like and subscribing to our channel, make sure that you aren't primed by our words. Also, keep in mind that your stimuli influence other people's behavior. So, make sure your influence is a positive one. And see you in the next video.